Good morning, all. Thank you for joining. I'm sure there'll be a few more still joining dribs and drabs over the coming minutes, but we're just after 10 now, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome to this MGSDP event, Flood Risk Management Challenges and Blue-Green Water Resilience. Could I ask everyone to make sure they're on mute? People will hopefully be coming in on mute, but if you're not on mute, please do that. Stop any issues with feedback. Feel free to switch off your camera. If you're having any issues with lag or latency, then switching off your camera can help with that. And this event is being recorded, and that will be made available later. So my name's James Murray, and start. Keeping, as I said, please ensure you're mute. Feel free to switch off your camera, which I've said. This has been recorded. Any questions you can put in the chat box, and we'll take that towards the end of the session. And I'll also just note thanks to Sniffer for the use of their platform for this event. So our agenda for today, first of all, you've got me, James Murray, MGSDP Manager. I'm going to cover flood risk now and with climate change. I'm going to touch on communication of flood risk, responsibilities, and taking action. And then we're going to review of blue-green infrastructure with some examples. Following me, we've got Dr. Louise Walker, Project Manager with Syria and Sustain. Polls to recent Sustain SUDS awards. We'll then have David Hayes for engineering at Glasgow City Council DRS, who's going to do a what next session. We'll have some time for questions. David Harley, Head of Planning and Water at SEPA, is then going to offer some closing comments. An 11:30 sharp finish. If we get there before then, fine, but otherwise we will be ending at 11:30, so people who've got other things to get on to do that. So the flood risk challenge won't be news to a lot of people, but we've had flood risk for a long time. Flood risk, got some images on screen there from back in 2000, which was really when the idea of the MGSDP together. But today, go Glasgow. And take long. If your home flooded significantly, it can be 18 months, it can be long before you get back. So it has a significant impact on society and mental health. If we want to find out about flood risk, well, where do we go? Starting point is the SEPA National Flood Hazard Maps. They're available online. If you haven't looked at these previously, then please do so. So this is national strategic mapping by SEPA to hazards from different sources, so river, surface water and coastal, and for different return periods, so high, medium and low are referred to on the website. And if you go into the website, it gives further explanation what each of those are. But certainly it's really the first one looked for the area where you may have friends and relatives live, for your community, where your business is, but it gives a strategic view. So you'll find when you go onto the website you can't write in, and that's because it is strategic level mapping. It's not to be used to identify flood risk for an individual property, but gives you an indication of flood risk for that locality. The flood challenge, SEPA's National Flood Risk Assessment 2018, NFRA 2018, identified that across Scotland for a 0.5%, and I'll talk about that in a minute, there's currently 284,000 properties, businesses risk of flooding from one or more sources. In terms of surface water, it's 210,000 properties or businesses and receptors at risk. By 2080, with climate change, the all sources number is to go up to 394,000. Bring it down a little bit more local level. Glasgow City region, again for the 0.5% event, currently 45 homes, businesses, receptors from all sources, and surface water, the vast bulk of that. And by 2080, 57,000 from all sources. So got a significant challenge there, both for Scotland and for the Glasgow City region. Climate change, well, climate change is, as everyone probably knows, is going to make all this more challenging. The graphs on the left-hand side, as you look, top's winter and the bottom summer, so it's for two different climate change scenarios, but generally winter's getting warmer and wetter, and those lines are showing the precipitation change in percentage. And generally, with summers being warmer, but possibly drier, we will be experiencing more rainfall events. And on the right-hand side, you can see that an increasing, that Scotland's annual rainfall is increasing, and a contributing factor to that is that we're getting more heavy rainfall events. So whilst the summers, in individual days might be getting a bit drier, we're going to have rainfall events that just adds to that total rainfall. And indeed, for the most recent decades, UK summers have been, on average, 13% wetter than 1961 to 1990. And UK winters have been 12% wetter, so a lot more water coming our way already and in the future. And it's not just SEPA and the society that are saying this. Climate Ready Clyde, they've done an opportunity assessment for the Glasgow City region and their risks by class. I've just put there around the ones that are related to flooding and flood risk. There's a lot of other risks that the Glasgow City region faces and, that are driven by climate change. But the focus of this session today is at flood risk. So you can see there's quite a number of red circles there. I have quite a challenge there. So that Climate Ready Clyde, their draft regional adaptation strategy is coming out for consultation. So keep an eye out for that. These figures here give an indication of the scale of increase that we should be allowing design. So SEPA's climate change allowances for flood risk assessment planning. There's three tables that we work from. Table 1, peak river for Clyde area, 44% river climate. Table 2, rainfall west and 50% out to 2100. Sea level rise working to 0.85 metres cumulative rise out to 2100. Seeing all round, and that just gives you an indication of the numbers that are attached to the increases we should allow for climate change. This slide just talking about the adaptation gap. Two aspects to climate change, and it's not my specialist field, but we've got mitigation, so that's about getting to net zero, and we've got adaptation, so that's about building resilience to existing risks, so risks that are already with us, and future climate change. Already had 1 degree of change, depending as to who you talk to, but we're currently on course 3 degrees of climate change. And net zero, it's for net zero in terms of our mitigation, but the whole of Scotland contributes about 0.3% of global. China's about 28% of global emissions. They're not even until 2030, although in a relatively short timescale thereafter, they're proposing to be carbon neutral. But it just sets out the challenge that we've got, and that we have to deliver both mitigation and adaptation parallel. And at the moment, there's a gap. we're doing a lot about the mitigation. We've got targets for getting to net zero. We've got dates for that. But where are our targets? That's a challenge. The targets for delivering adaptation and resilience for this city region, because there is a gap. Is directed toward. We need more directed towards adaptation. And we have information that can help us do that. Scotland, an excellent website that's a lot of detail on what is adaptation, why adapt, how to adapt. It's on place-based, equitable adaptation. So there's tools, case studies, information, adaptation challenge, and go and have a look at the Scotland website to find out that. Moving on now to flood risk. So I talked earlier on about the 0.5% event. So that's the probability of that event in any given year, every year. So the 0.5% in old terms, and to be honest, it's still used today. In old terms, we would have referred to a 1 in 200 year storm event return period, and that means a 0.5% probability. We try not to talk about a 1 in 200 year, a 1 in 100 year, a 1 in 10 year event these days, because when you're communicating with people, they tend to hear that and think, well, it happened once in 200 years, and that's not the case. What that means is a 0.5% chance of that event happening in any year. So similarly, the 1 in 100 year event doesn't mean it's only going to happen once in 100 years. It means it's got a 1% chance probability of it happening every year. So we try and avoid that 1 in 200 year talking about return periods, although many people still use it. It's possibly a little bit communicate that way, but it doesn't help with the understanding, particularly when you're communicating with communities that are not technically minded, or people that are not technically minded. But it is a challenge in terms of communicating flood risk for us. We also, in the industry, try not to talk about ending flooding, stopping flooding. We talk about reducing the risks and impacts of flooding. And if you deliver a project which has been designed to address a certain level of probability of flooding, if you get flooding will happen, be the same extent, but so telling people you're going to do a project that ends flooding, stops flooding, prevents flooding is misleading. You need to talk about risk impacts of flooding so that people appreciate there is still that residual risk there. Cumulative probability. So again, trying to help understand how the probability can affect people over time. Or as the storm, percent chance of happening in any. Statistically, if you roll that up over, say, years that you're how good on, and the probable event over those 20 years is 0.5%. So if you knew that there was a percent chance of that event, it's a way of computing probability over a period of time, and certainly it gives you a bigger number that's more likely to in source of action.
James, I'm just wondering if you could maybe switch off your video, because there's quite a few people are getting your voiceover breaking up. Thanks.
Okay, hopefully this helps with the audio. Thanks for that, David. The other challenges that we've got, so we've talked about climate change, the other challenges that we've got in terms of flood risk, loss of open historic watercourses that urban areas have developed. So these watercourses have either been put into culvert and below ground, or way back in time they were just so polluted that they probably actually became part of the sewer network. So that's meant we've got a loss of conveying capacity in our urban areas. Below ground drainage systems have finite capacity. You know, a pipe, a tank, it can only store or carry so much water, and climate change is bringing events that are beyond the capacity of assets that were sometimes constructed many, many years ago. Most of our urban areas are served by combined sewers, so that's the foul and the surface water going into the same pipe. And we need to get that existing surface water out to reduce flood risk and provide space for new development foul flow to go into the sewer system. Urban creep, so that's new hard surfaces, property extensions, paving over front gardens, etc., causing a loss of permeable area, which reduces the potential for ground to infiltrate and attenuate rainfall, and creates more and faster runoff that then gets into our drainage system and has to be managed. Currently, there's a consultation on extension of permitted development rights. So I think the first part of the second phase of that, I think, launched yesterday and will be running through the course of the next 6 to 9 months. Permitted development rights can present a challenge. You know, there's certain things that householders can do that can increase flood risk by increasing impermeable area. So that is a challenge for flood risk. Maintenance, so lack of awareness of condition of assets, particularly below ground assets, is a challenge. You know, it's not easy to inspect below ground assets, but also the lack of or reducing budgets. You know, as budgets for maintenance are being cut, our assets are being put under ever more pressure, so the budget should be going the other way. Development and regeneration pressure. Everyone will know that we need to build more houses, but you know, we need to build these in the right way with the right infrastructure. And also, we do still have in certain sections quite a water risk adverse society. We need to be more comfortable about living with water and having water in our communities and managing it. Overall, with all those challenges, you know, I think our summary at the moment is we're not keeping up with these challenges in terms of what we're delivering. So, responding to the challenges, I don't think people will be surprised for me to say that there is no silver bullet. There's no one thing that we can do that's going to solve everything. And flood risk resilience is most effective when delivered in a layered, adaptive approach. And the time for action, well, we need to be proactive. The best time to take action to reduce flood risk was during the last spell of dry weather. The second best time to take actions today, both are preferable to taking action after a flooding event, when you have the cost of recovery, the cost of responding to deal with, and then the cost of delivering something to reduce risk for the next event. A little bit about responsibilities. So, in Scotland, it's the owner's responsibility to protect a property from flooding. That's the starting point in Scotland. Landowners also have other responsibilities to undertake maintenance and prevent deterioration of watercourses, including culverted watercourses that in some cases they may not even know about. And they have a responsibility to not increase the flood risk to others. Scottish Water is responsible for the drainage of surface water from roofs and any paved surface within the property boundary or the curtilage. Local authorities have several roles relating to flooding, with powers and responsibilities under the Flood Risk Management Act, as the Roads Authority and as the Planning Authority. And SEPA is Scotland's National Flood Forecasting, Flood Warning and Strategic Flood Risk Management Authority. Our risks are a factor of our actions and the actions of others. So we must all take action to reduce the risk and impact of flooding for ourselves and others. We all have a responsibility for ourselves and others. So in terms of those layers for flood risk resilience, the first layer really is really to get informed and plan. On earlier about flood maps, awareness of flood risk for your area. Where friends and family live, where your commute goes, where your business is. And if you are at flood risk, or if you want to find out more about what you can do, then we've got the Floodline website, where you can develop a plan for action to protect your, or to respond to flooding at your home or your business or your travel. You can also, via the Floodline website, sign up for flood alerts. So you get notification when a flood alert has been issued for your area by your mobile phone. and that just allows you to get a heads up on possible risk incoming. Next layer we look at is property flood resilience. Scottish Government published towards the end of last year Living with Flooding. That's an action plan for delivering property flood resilience in Scotland. There's 3 objectives in that, and that's to build a better evidence base. So research is ongoing and case studies are being developed. So that research is looking at uptake of property flood resilience. What are the barriers to uptake of property flood resilience, and trying to understand why someone who perhaps has been flooded in the past hasn't then taken any steps to increase their resilience to any future events. So that's going to be very useful research when that's completed. Influence policy and provide clear guidance. So that's looking at what we need to influence in terms of raising awareness and changing how we do things. So that's looking at possible changes to the building regulations, possible changes to the home reports. At the home report, you provide a lot of information. You have to provide information on the energy efficiency of the building. There is an argument that there should be something in there about the flood risk of the property and any resilience measures that are there. And also training. So guidance around training can be informed by things like Syria's recent code of practice for property flood resilience, but also looking at training for people like chartered surveyors if they need to do an assessment of a property's flood risk and possible resilience measures. And the third objective is recognise and support positive change. So that's looking at communication of property flood resilience benefits and engaging with communities to try and increase uptake of that. The next layer is looking at making space for water and managing risk. So flooding, whether it can be managed or unmanaged, but it's basically water in excess of the drainage system capacity. Now, we can manage water in places and it may still be called flooding, but at least it's managed, and that's eminently preferable to having it unmanaged. And where we manage that and what is an acceptable level of risk will vary depending upon the receptor and the scale of event. But in general, and as we'll see through some of the examples, we'll look at, if we've got excess water, manage it somewhere, then open space is better for managing that flood water than roads. But then also roads is better than managing it in homes and businesses and schools and hospitals, etc. So we need to have that open-minded look at where we're going to manage this excess water and plan for that, so that it can be done in a controlled manner. The interventions layer, grey versus blue-green. It's not so much versus. We're always going to have traditional grey approaches, and so that's focusing more on capacity, pipes, tanks, pumping, but that's carbon heavy and not sustainable long term. So we need to transition to more blue-green nature-based suds, sponge concept solutions. All these terms are broadly interchangeable. So I'll be talking a lot about suds and blue-green infrastructure, but it's nature-based solutions. It's the sponge concept. And that's trying to manage water on the surface close to where it falls before it gets into our current drainage system, and manage it via ponds, basins, street trees, rain gardens, swales, green roofs, natural flood management measures, etc. Because they're a more sustainable, adaptable, long-term delivery of interventions that give multiple benefits. So we're always going to need some of the grey, but we just need to get that balance tilted more towards the blue-green if we want to be resilient and sustainable in terms of our approach to flood risk long-term. If we want healthy people, we need healthy places, and the blue-green can give us that. So a little bit more detail on the why, the blue-green bit. So it delivers multiple benefits, reducing attenuation and runoff, evaporation, plant uptake, provides treatment, so there's water quality benefits. It's carbon light or even positive long term, so that helps to meet our net zero targets. Contributes to air quality through plant and green vegetation. Similarly, combats urban heat. Good for biodiversity. good for placemaking, improves mental health, can aid asset management. If water's being managed on the surface, it's more obvious when there is an issue to be dealt with. Works with existing infrastructure, so we can add it on to existing infrastructure. It enhances existing natural capital or green open space, and is very much part of the green recovery from COVID that we're looking to deliver. There are challenges, a lack of familiarity in terms of the construction, the delivery, the pricing of blue-green infrastructure, but that's improving over time. Maintenance, you may be changing, those organisations responsible for maintenance may be changing how they're maintaining things because they're maintaining something slightly different. But generally, it's not anything new, it's just something different to what they were maintaining. Competing for available space, so if you're putting something in the roads, for example, we need to look at challenges around aligning with active travel aspirations or even community parking aspirations. Ground conditions, and you look at utilities, contamination, they can all influence your blue-green design. Retrofit is disruptive, so you need to consult and communicate. And there is still debate around who pays and who gets the benefits. Generally, it's society overall, but still needs to be funded from someone's pocket. How to deliver blue-green infrastructure? We need to plan ahead if we want sustainable, water-resilient city region in a changing climate. So that's multifunctional blue-green infrastructure first approach. We need to invest in enabling infrastructure to create the links for blue-green infrastructure to join up and create a blue-green network. We need to take opportunities as they arise to deliver multiple benefits. If you're doing urban realm improvements, if you're doing active travel, traffic calming, maintenance, redevelopment, look at how you can deliver extra benefit by managing the water through those as well. We need to collaborate and share knowledge of the opportunities and the learning and share the costs. And there's a number of organisations and groups that are involved in this area that can collaborate to deliver some of these benefits. Need to assess the risks. Is it appropriate? Is it the right tree in the right place? That sort of level. We need to consult and engage. What are people's concerns about delivering blue-green infrastructure? And we need to plan and fund both the construction and the maintenance. Sewers for Scotland, a couple of years ago, increased the number of the range of SUDs that Scottish Water will consider for vesting. And we also have Section 7 Memorandum of Understanding these days, which is a mechanism for sharing responsibility for maintaining SUDs between local authorities and Scottish Water. So I'm breaking this next section up into 3 parts, and I will move quickly because I'm conscious I'm likely to overrun. But new development, SUDs are mandatory for more than one property. It's easy to do SUDs the minimum level. It's not so easy to do SUDs well. We've got some good examples. We've got lots of bad examples. It is improving. But certainly for new development, it's easiest if you do it as an infrastructure first, blue-green placemaking approach with early engagement. Water flows downhill, so unless you want to be carbon heavy in terms of how you manage, treat, pump that, then recognise that water flows downhill. So allow for that in your design of your development and where you're going to manage the water. And engage with Scottish Water and the Planning Authority, who will say to you, you need to consider this, you need to perhaps take it over in this direction in terms of your surface water discharge, and that may add costs to your development. So plan that up front so you know up front if you're going to have to do these things. We need to use water as an asset, manage it on the surface with blue-green infrastructure. Mentioned already, Sewers for Scotland and Section 7 MOU, they're there to facilitate the delivery of SUDs and ensure that they're planned and maintained long term. Scottish Water Surface Water Policy and their hierarchy of discharge options is the starting point. So just looking at that in a little bit more detail, Scottish Water Surface Water Policies, no new surface water into the combined sewer network. Work with developers and regulatory bodies on removing surface water from the existing combined sewer network and support economic growth. So their hierarchy of options for Scottish Water is rainwater stored and reused on site, ideally. Rainwater harvesting, don't do much of that at all, but we should be. Surface water drained through the soil through the use of That's infiltrating into the ground. In the west of Scotland, that's a bit challenging due to our glacial till soils generally, but it can be done in some locations. Surface water drain to watercourse or existing or proposed suds. That's usually where we're ending up if we can't do one or two. 4 is surface water drain to a surface water sewer. And then down at the bottom, the least preferred option is surface water drain to a combined sewer. To get to that point, you need to, as a developer, justify why you can't do 1, 2, 3, or 4. And saying it's going to cost too much is not justification. If you get to 5, then Scottish Water is going to set a maximum discharge rate, and consideration will also be given to requiring removal of an equivalent amount of surface water from another part of the sewer catchment, so that there's net zero detriment to the sewer. The next type of development, carrying on, just a few examples here from new development. So I showed some on a previous slide already, some swales, and this is just some images of ponds, rain gardens, basins, all from the Glasgow region, showing what can be done. So these are some relatively good examples, how they can integrate with existing facilities, existing houses. The one on the top right's at an existing school, so it can be managed within our development. And indeed, roads also require suds. So, good examples out in the Cathkin Relief Road was delivered by South Lanarkshire Council of a number of suds interventions along that new road there. The next level is redevelopment retrofit, so that's harder to do than pure new. Again, suds mandatory, again, easiest to do if it's an infrastructure approach and you think about it and you consider placemaking and engage early with Scottish Water and the local authorities to where that surface water is going to go. Again, informed by Sewers for Scotland, because you're redeveloping here, you may not have quite the blank sheet to start with. Sewers for Scotland does have a waiver process where you can discuss with Scottish Water how you may try to get as close as possible to the surface water vestable options for suds that are in Sewers for Scotland. And again, Scottish Water surface water policy is the starting point. A couple of images here of Clyde Gateway's London Road development, where there was a number of different interventions put in place as part of a chain of suds down through the site. And again, more examples here from Clyde Gateway, Scotland's first green regeneration innovation district, where they're very much taking the placemaking approach for multiple benefits that they're putting in suds ahead of development coming to enable that development to come on board and connect into strategic suds that they've already put in place. So it's very much facilitating redevelopment and regeneration in a best practice way. Hardest one to do is the pure retrofit. It's disruptive with multiple stakeholders to engage if you're doing it in urban areas. Generally low tech, but we also have things like Glasgow's Smart Canal, which has basically put smart sensors and intelligence into an existing asset to use that as a very large suds pond in effect, but certainly to provide capacity in terms of flood risk management for development and regeneration in the north of Glasgow. Pure retrofit, we're looking for betterment, disconnection ideally, or at least attenuation and delivery of multiple benefits. It can be large or small. A number of examples got on screen there are individual property level rain gardens, downpipe planters, water butts. They can all have a positive contribution in terms of attenuating surface water runoff, and projects like the 10,000 Rain Gardens project are good examples, or have good examples of how to do this. In pure retrofit, we do need to act swiftly to act on opportunities as they arise. So that's where we're doing other things, and we can realise multiple benefits if we add in a bit of surface water management whilst we're doing that as part of the redevelopment or urban realm improvements or active travel. I'm not going to have time to go through all of these examples that I had, so I'm going to quickly skip through a few of them and then not go through them all because I'm taking far too long. But Cardown Surface Water Management Plan, Blairtummock and Easterhouse, low quality, open space, with development sites lying vacant. The existing watercourse, which is the dashed blue line, you'll see there, and some local blaze pitches. Glasgow City Council, Nature Scotland and Seven Lochs has improved this green space, opened up the watercourse, provided a suds pond, suds basin for future hatched areas there for development to come forward. The open watercourse provides that flood capacity to manage surface water above the surface, but also huge improvements to the green space there, and also new active travel pathways and corridors for communities to access the green space that's been created there. Other sites have been delivered as part of this project, where we've retrofit suds into existing open green space at Croftcroyne Road, Croftcroyne Park, Cranhill Park. We also have some highway rain gardens up the area and new connections put in for development to come forward and connect into these suds. So very much taking a strategic approach, both reducing the surface water pressure on the existing combined sewer, but also allowing for development to come forward in a sustainable way. I'm going to skip through Hillington and Moss Heights because you can find out more information about that on Nature Scotland's Green Infrastructure Project website. South East Glasgow Surface Water Management Plan, Croftfoot Primary School, large hard standing areas and roof areas that we're connecting into the combined. What we've done here is we've picked up those surface water runoff points. We're managing through to use games area with storage below that. We've also got an amphitheatre which acts as an exceedance management point. So if it fills up the below ground storage, it will also fill up this above ground storage prior to discharging via a new connection into the surface water culvert, taking all of that out of the combined sewer. With East Glasgow, we're also delivering highway rain gardens. So these are vegetated areas that take surface water off the road, manage it, slow it down, before it then goes back in, or in this case, goes into the watercourse. Many locations, when you put in highway rain gardens, it'll slow the flow down. It may still go back into the combined sewer, but at least you're getting the benefits of the attenuation and reducing the peak of that surface water runoff. Other interventions at South East Glasgow in terms of multifunctional green space improvements, so deculverting, new suds basins, providing additional benefits from what was existing open green space. We've got a whole number of other surface water management plans. The top two there are on site at the moment. Other surface water management plans being facilitated by City Deal funding coming along in the programme, and other non-City Deal surface water management plans being developed at the moment. City Centre Avenues project being delivered by Glasgow City Council, so a network of streets through Glasgow City Centre where urban realm improvements are planned, and first one delivered at Sauchiehall Street, so the bottom two images show active travel, reduction in car space, and surface water management being provided through street trees there, with the aspiration that the next phases of the avenues projects will take our now and move that into the future with much more blue-green infrastructure being provided as the subsequent avenues are delivered through the programme. So that's Cambridge Street and the underline, which, as we call it, Argyle Street as well, through the City Centre Avenues project. And indeed, we have North Glasgow SDF, which has just gone out for consultation as of yesterday, I believe it was. And again, showing here the aspiration that we're reaching for in terms of bringing blue-green into these local town centres within the North Glasgow area to improve resilience and to make them nicer places to be. So, I'm going to hand over now to Louise. I'll let her do her introduction herself because she'll do it much better than I will, and I'll let her share her screen to take you through this. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'll just put my camera on to say hello and then I'll turn it off when I'm presenting. Just bear with me and I'll find the right screen to share. Now, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, fantastic. I'll just turn my camera off. I don't know how to do, so I'll just carry on. So good morning, everyone. I'm Louise Walker, Project Manager with Syria. My work's focused on support for more sustainable water management. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today about our work and showcase some of the fantastic case studies we've received for this year's SUDS Awards, which was held virtually on the 16th of July this year. I'll give a brief introduction to Syria, SUSTRA, which is Syria's community for SUDS and blue-green infrastructure. Then I'll give an overview of some good practice examples for surface water management that were received as entries to this year's SUDS Awards. So Syria is the Construction Industry Research and Information Association. It's been around since 1960, originally very focused on civil engineering, but it's moved to also include blue and green infrastructure. We have independent outputs, which are objective, using collaboration to look at opportunities and constraints in the built environment. We're engaged with SUDS, green infrastructure and natural flood management, with a particular focus on science and practicalities of surface water management. And we're committed to improving performance through producing and sharing guidance, training, seminars, conferences and networking. We've got well over 100 case studies, including award entries. We're committed to championing the delivery of multiple benefits, and we're currently including this in the work we're developing. If anyone wants to find out more, please do have a look at the SUSTRAIN website or get in contact with me. So the first SUS Awards were held in 2018 with the aim of making it a biannual event. We had planned for a big celebratory event this year at City Hall in London, but circumstances meant that we had to take the event online. There was numerous judging criteria for the awards, including those listed above, but the quote from one judge sums it up. We were looking for schemes that move the subject forward. In 2018, we received 39 entries, and this year there were 41, which was pleasantly surprising given the difficult circumstances. I've been asked to talk about a selection of these case studies, which demonstrate good practice for both new build and retrofit SUDS. So I'd like to summarise 6 of this year's award-winning entries. It will be an overview of what the judges liked about these schemes. I wasn't involved in their delivery, but if anyone has any specific questions about the details of the schemes, I should be able to put you in touch with the entrants. So the first of the new build was Climate Innovation District in Leeds. This was a joint winner in the new build large-scale SUDS category. It's a 250 million car-free housing development in Leeds on a brownfield site and described as the largest sustainable development in the UK. It aims to create sustainable low-carbon communities. The City of Leeds suffered devastating floods on Boxing Day in 2015, and so preventing surface water from entering the city's drainage network is key. These are the first houses built as family houses in the city centre for over 90 years. The development is on the River Aire. It's encouraged to be car-free, incorporates more than 500 low-carbon homes across different phases, which also include manufacturing offices, a car-free school, and community facilities. So to give some context, this was the flooding in Leeds, showing a different development. There's a very real need to respond to these events, build in resilience for future events, and to support the capacity networks within the city centres, which will allow new developments to come forward. Just to show the location, here is where the Climate Innovation District is, quite close to the city centre and train station. So what I'm going to talk about is the first phase of the car-free master plan, which is Area A on the plan. The entire landscape is permeable and functional. The development mimics nature in terms of drainage. The SUDS features also add amenity value for residents and the wider community. All of the area is landscaped, but it's still capable of being trafficked by emergency vehicles if necessary. There's a sub-base which will collect rainfall during high rainfall events. So only in the case of a 1% chance of storm, the actual entrance put 1 in 100-year storm, but noted what you said, James. But only in that case should the basin fill up. There's extensive tree planting across the site, which also helps to reduce the volume of water reaching the river. And there's a significant reduction in the amount of buried infrastructure normally associated with a traditional drainage scheme. Now, I've been part of this scheme on a boat, and it's very tranquil, a lovely place to live. The judge's comments on this were that it's brilliant. SUDS and housing should be promoted as much as possible. It's very urban, very innovative. It was a difficult site with limited space, but done well. It gives a good example of maximising the opportunities. SUDS were planned in from the start. There was lots of challenges that were overcome, which was helped by the lack of roads. And the final comment was, developers say there is no room for SUDS, and this demonstrates that there is. So the second new build scheme is Albion Close in Lincoln. The competition considered SUDS completed since 2016. While this scheme was designed in 2012, it wasn't formally adopted by Lincolnshire County Council and Anglian Water until 2017. So it was allowed into the competition. It's considered by Lincolnshire County Council to be a prime example of early good practice SUDS. It's well thought out and incorporates the principles of a SUDS management train and demonstrates where over subsequent years important lessons have been learned that have influenced current good practice in Lincolnshire. The overall surface water strategy ensured that non-statutory SUDS standards were met, but also went beyond these to provide increased local amenity, natural habitat and biodiversity. It includes rainwater harvesting, permeable paving, bioretention basins which are adopted by Anglian Water, grass filter strips adopted by the Highway Authority, grass swales for conveyance and wire basket check dams. And the detached dwellings were built to level 5 of the Code for Sustainable Homes. So with regard to managing flood risk to and from the site, flooding on the drainage system doesn't occur on any part of the site for a 1 in 30 year. This is how the entrance describes it, rainfall event, and it doesn't occur during a 1 in 100 year rainfall event in any part of a building or for neighbouring sites. The climate change allowance of plus 30% was included, and flow routes were taken into account by the design in case of exceedance, which directed the flow to the existing public highway. The drainage system doesn't exceed 4 litres per second, which was stated as the remaining capacity within the surface water sewer by Anglian Water. The judge's comments were that from a design point of view, it's not spectacular, but it illustrates how challenges were overcome. It gives something to point to. It's a pathfinder for other local authorities. It was a very difficult site and ask. It was a sloping site, but the mass house builder and local authority worked together well. A final comment was they need to stop close mowing it to achieve more insect life. The third new build is IKEA in Greenwich. This is it has 4,000 metres squared of green and blue roof and roof garden, plus 7 green roof bike shelters. There's a rainwater harvesting system, ground level wildlife gardens and habitat creation. It's the IKEA at Greenwich has achieved an outstanding BREEAM UK New Construction Certificate, which is this accolade's held by just 320 buildings around the world, It's the first in the UK and only the second retail unit in the world to receive the sustainability rating with over 90%. It provides water storage, minimal runoff, rainwater harvesting, habitat, wellbeing and recreation, rooftop farming, building insulation, carbon reduction and sequestration, and an opportunity for tourism. The green roofs, blue roof and roof garden consist of biodiverse sedum covered areas, wildflower meadows, raised urban farming beds for community use, and all surround a rooftop pavilion which is accessible all year round during store opening hours. It's London's largest accessible rooftop. There's various events it was used for. I'm not sure under current circumstances whether that's the case. The judge's comments, probably quite churlishly, was that it could have been more holistic rather than just the green roof. Something could have been done with the car park. But both this and being close are trailblazing examples of SUDs in new developments. So just to go on to retrofit examples, the London Borough of Haringey undertook a detailed feasibility study to look at what environmental improvements it could make, along with enhancing a public park. And this showed that SUDS features combined with modifications to the surface water drainage network within the site and nearby roads would reduce flood risk both locally and downstream of the site. The primary objectives were to reduce flows from the area into the highway drainage network and Thames Water Sewer network, and to utilise SUDS features. Secondary objectives were to identify low-cost options, minimise disruption, ensure maintenance requirements were not overly onerous, and improve the quality of the environment. 13 gardens constructed for surface water storage and treatment to take runoff from surrounding roads. Any residual clean water goes back into the highway drains, and any overflow is discharged into gullies at less than greenfield runoff rate. Swales were constructed to store and convey water between various rain gardens and detention basins. And there's a mainly grassed area to achieve maximum water quality benefits and reduce maintenance costs. The surface storage basins provide flow control through attenuation of stormwater runoff. They're designed to be dry and only hold water for a short period of time during a 1% rain event, and it includes 12 new trees as well. The judge's comments were that 100-year mitigation is remarkable. It's similar to quite a lot of other projects we see with swales and rain gardens, but the use of different materials was very good. It was a good scheme at no cost. The steel circle in a public space might have created a problem that had to be solved, but it was a very good scheme. The next example is 3 pocket parks that have been created in South East London in the retrofit small scale SUDS category. These are Pelton Road, Mell Street and Hoskins Street, and I'll just run through these quickly. This was a joint winner in the retrofit small scale SUDS category. The judge's comments were that the before and after photos create the wow factor, and they're great examples of delivery of the 4 pillars of SUDS. And this type of approach is applicable everywhere. All 3 look very good and are integrated with the highway. And you can see the location there alongside the Thames. So Pelton Road, this junction was closed to traffic since the 1980s, and during that time a large London plane tree grew. This was the gateway to historic Greenwich and was quite underwhelming. So the new layout centres around the formation of 3 linked drainage swales. One swale takes surface water from the road. There's a shallow layer of topsoil with a stone filtration bed beneath to break down pollutants. Below that, the swales are linked by a perforated pipe drainage system to help reduce stress on the local drainage system and replenish the surrounding groundwater. These provide water for both the existing plane tree and 8 newly planted trees. So the design was for a clutter-free streetscape with improvements for pedestrians and cyclists, and the inclusion of informal play boulders and hopscotch patterns that are part of the Play on the Way theme that linked 2 local primary schools and a nursery. Hofstra had 2 major constraints, an air quality monitoring station and a medium pressure gas main. So greening proposals couldn't interfere with these, but to maximise the benefit, the proposals extended further to spread out the greening. So similarly with the other pocket parks, the SUDs remove as much surface water runoff as possible from the highway using swales. The system is designed to retain existing assets such as road gullies that will only come into use during extreme weather events. The design approach also ensures that utility companies and the Highway Authority can maintain their assets without having to source expensive materials or undertake specialist construction methods. Mel Street's the largest of the 3 pocket parks, situated between 2 council housing blocks. It includes an improved streetscape for pedestrians and cyclists, a community garden space where residents and local people can grow food and be involved in the maintenance of the garden. And there's also a green roof tool store with a community notice board and a water supply. There was supposed to be a community planting day, which had to be cancelled, but people are growing plants at home, mainly for food production that they can plant out when restrictions ease. Excuse me. A second phase has been designed, which will include a shared pedestrian street with more planting and swales and place for a market stall. Excuse me. So my final example is Clanderboy Primary School, rainwater garden in County Down, Northern Ireland. So the rainwater garden is located in the grounds of the primary school with an existing space interspersed with mature trees and close to a dense residential area near the town centre. The SUDS features were proposed by Northern Ireland Water to resolve 2 surface water management issues. 1, an increase in stormwater volume, and an existing...
Hi Louise, sorry, your audio has gone very quiet.
Sorry, I think I just moved my...
That's better. That's better. Yep, thank you.
No problem. So the 2 issues to solve were an increase in stormwater volume and an existing culvert capacity issue resulting in out of sewer flooding in times of heavy rainfall. The drainage strategy involves interception of overland flows from hard-standing areas and the attenuation before discharging into the local stream. The total area of hard standing is 2,700 metres squared, which can be divided into 3 areas, each of which have a different SUDS management train. The judge's comments on this entry were that there are lots of elements to this scheme. A lot of space was available and it just seemed quite overcomplicated. There's a swale to collect water on the road, which results in water quality and quantity management. There's a geocellular tank was included, and it was not clear why, unless it was to keep the rill working for the children to play with. It does facilitate play, and the grass mounds work well for attenuation. It's an imaginative and illustrative case study. The key challenges, as you might imagine, were predominantly linked to health and safety concerns. The Education Authority raised concerns about the risk of pupils attending the school and the potential of legal action taken against the board should accidents occur. Due to the location of the rain garden, community engagement meetings were held to discuss the projects and planned works and to address possible concerns. A visual design proposal of the project was created and shared with the community, along with the risks of a detailed risk assessment report carried out by ROSPA. The inclusion of the ROSPA risk assessment was critical at laying valid concerns regarding the inclusion of open water within a school environment, with the third-party independence and objectivity of it adding comfort for decision makers. Key to the success of the project was the early inclusion, buy-in and subsequent advocacy of the school's Board of Governors, and in particular the headmistress, whose energy, vision and positive approach to perceived obstacles secured the success of the project. So reflections on the SUDS Awards this year. The judges noted the hugely improved quality and innovation of SUDS schemes over the 2 years since the last awards, and this prompted them to consider additional categories, which included small community projects, of which we received a lot more entries, and to consider the innovative approach to overcoming challenges. So people that are not just installing schemes they've seen before, actually thinking about the challenges. And this includes the last point, which is good master planning. So thinking about SUDs, water flow, etc. from the beginning, as James mentioned. So we will be considering that in future awards. Like most of Syria's projects, Sustain is funded by the industry, and I'd just like to thank our partners and supporters for making that possible. Thank you for listening. Please do contact me if you want any details of these or other projects. And please do look out for our Blue-Green conference, which is upcoming. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Louise. A lot of good examples there, and plenty more on the Sustain website. There's lots of case studies there. People want to go and have a look at those and get a little bit more inspiration for sort of the broad range of SUDs that can be delivered and can be delivered well. The next part of our session today, we're going to have David Hay giving us some words on what next. So, David, if you're able to share your screen, give me a shout if you need any assistance with that.
Okay, thanks, James. Just by way of introduction, David Hay, I'm Group Manager for Engineering within Development Regeneration Services at Glasgow City Council. The lead officer for flood risk management within the city, including delivery of the MGSDP City Deal programme. Just my thanks to Louise for taking the time to present this morning and show us the art possible. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up, but after my few slides, we do have a question and answer session, and it'd be good for those who can multitask to maybe post up some questions in the chat column, and we can then take those at so that is hopefully my slides up on the screen. I can
Yes, that's us now, David.
That's great. Okay. So I think this is a journey going forward that we need to travel together as the balance of probability a major flood event will hit the city region. I'd like to start by just taking a moment to reflect on the MGSDP vision that seeks to end uncontrolled flooding by 2060. Now, there are many definitions for uncontrolled flooding, but let us assume we mean preventing internal flooding for a flood event that has a 0.5% probability of occurring in any 1 year, or a 1 in 200 year event, as it was previously expressed as. As James noted in his presentation, the National Flood Risk Assessment in 2018 assessed that there were 45,000 properties within the city boundary that fall within this risk bracket. There are arguments as to why, for a single event, the number would be higher or lower, but it is a significant number, even if you don't include the properties within the city region out with the city boundary. If you think of the images that you've seen of flooding in Ballater or Carlisle, a skip sitting out every impacted property, 45,000 skips. The families and businesses displaced, the economic shock, the impact on vulnerable communities for insurance cover is likely to be less. I've structured my slides under the headings of policy, planning, knowledge, investment and innovation. This reflects that the fulfilment of our vision will require a multifaceted approach. Our policy platform needs to continue to develop, and we welcome the ongoing Scottish Government review into surface water policy with the aim of delivering water resilient places. Other activities ongoing at the present time is the review into drainage charges for post-2021. And at the moment, there isn't really an effective incentive for people to disconnect surface water or attenuate the rate that surface water enters our combined sewer network. And I think our hope is that the charging structure would evolve to be more of a carrot and stick. As James noted, urban creep impacts and increases the risk of flooding. And whilst local authorities have existing powers to require the additional surface water runoff from home extensions, for example, to be attenuated through mechanisms such as drain down water butts, this is not something that is being enforced within Glasgow. And part of that is because the market remains immature for products such as drain down water butts. And what we are seeking to do is to stimulate this market so we can then bring in these policy levers that help to mitigate a flood event. During the implementation of the MGSDP City Deal surface water management plans, we've encountered a number of hurdles where there would be merit in there being an extension of the statutory powers. And I think when the Sewage Scotland Act was drafted in 1968, the intention of the need for surface water management plans to counter surface water flooding wasn't foreseen. And it has to be recognised that the majority of the 45,000 properties at risk within the city are at a risk of surface water flooding. In terms of planning, the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act introduced a 6-year planning cycle, and this allows the responsible authorities, including Scottish Water and the local authorities, to take a risk-based and planned-led approach. And it then means that we are not reacting to the latest flood event. The main consultation for the Cycle 2 strategies, which run for the period 2022 through to 2028, gets launched in March next year. And we would really welcome both SEPA and the local authorities and Scottish Water greater engagement in this consultation exercise. Does our understanding of flooding that has been impacting local communities, is that accurate? Is there agreement on the actions that we bring forward to address this flood risk? The greater engagement in consultation will also have the twin benefit of raising awareness of flood risk. And as James noted in his presentation, people are responsible for protecting their property. As I noted earlier, our fulfilment of our vision requires a multifaceted approach, and including using source control, reshaping open spaces to store floodwater where it currently runs off, and creating new conduits to transfer water through vulnerable areas, property level protection where engineering solutions are not viable. These strands need to be brought together in a roadmap to 2060, and we cannot achieve these objectives overnight. In terms of knowledge, it is critical that we make evidence-based decisions. SEPA, South Lanarkshire Council and the City Council are currently investing in new hydraulic models for the River Clyde, and a new model for the tidal Clyde, where flood risk is determined by spring high tides and storm surges, will be used to inform the development of an adaptive strategy. The Smart Canal, which is unlocking major regeneration sites in the north of Glasgow, provides the opportunity for knowledge to be gained on the performance of housing-based SUDs through the real-time monitoring of both the volume and the water quality that is discharging from these development sites into the canal. And what this will help inform is the level of attenuation that SUDS achieves, and we can then use that for further calibration of the hydraulic models that inform the design. Within Glasgow, we have only a limited number of rain gauges, and there is a question mark as to whether or not we fully understand the frequency of these intense storms that cause flooding, particularly during the summer. And what we are working with alongside SEPA is to deploy rain gauges to schools to improve the level of knowledge we have with regard to storm data within the city. In terms of investment, we need to recognise the significant investment that has been made to date. Scottish Water committed 100 million for the Shield Fall Tunnel. The City Council, with support from the Scottish Government, committed 50 million to the White Hart Water Flood Prevention Scheme. City Deal is investing 45 million in increasing drainage capacity. 15 million has been committed to the Smart Canal, and we still have 45,000 properties at risk of flooding. Investment is required to stand still and avoid the number of vulnerable properties increasing due to climate change and urban creep. Scottish Water's next investment programme, SR21, is set to increase the focus on blue and green infrastructure and will form part of a longer-term development plan that Scottish Water are bringing forward. And I think part of the success of the MGSDP is bringing partners together to share the burden of this investment, and we welcome the Clyde Gateway project that they're leading at Mollsmire Park in the south side of the city. And we really welcome the support from other public sector agencies, such as SEPA through the Water Environment Fund and SNH through the Green Infrastructure Fund. James touched on a couple of the SNH funded projects in his presentation, but the Mollsmire Park project is a further example of that, and we hope to be on site at Queensland Gardens on the south side of the city, which is another SNH funded project next year. Looking forward, a key activity for the partnership is building that business case for increased investment to achieve our 2060 vision, including making the case for a Green City Deal. In terms of innovation, we recognise that we don't have all of the answers and all of the tools that we need to realise our 2060 vision. Scottish Water, on the back of their policy of no new surface water connections to the combined sewer, we expect to see an increased uptake of grey water recycling, where rainfall is stored in below ground tanks, and we see the opportunity to make these tanks smart by linking them to the Smart Canal control base, so that when a heavy rainstorm comes across the city, we can pump out these tanks and then we maximise the storage volume that they provide to mitigate the effects of that storm. And the council is looking to pilot this approach on part of its new build nursery programme. In terms of surface water flood warning system, SEPA piloted during the 2014 Commonwealth Games a surface water warning system similar to the river flood warning system, and we're in discussions with SEPA to get this added as one of the actions that will be delivered during the second cycle. And we see this being key to underpinning a successful property level protection scheme. And on the River Clyde, within the tidal section, the City Council and SEPA are working together to develop a catchment scale compensatory storage strategy, so that we are protecting the functional floodplain, and we're seeing no net loss of that functional floodplain. And this will require us to bring forward innovation in terms of modelling and how compensatory storage is provided within the tidal reach of the floodplain. So thank you, and I will hand back to James to coordinate the question and answers.
Great, thank you very much, David. I'm just going to, I'll just share my screen just so that we've got that slide up there at the moment as well. Thank you for that. I've been just casting my eye over the chat. Not many in terms of actual questions in there, but certainly a good bit of discussion around vacant and derelict land and the potential that has to provide a function for blue-green infrastructure and surface water management. And also good to note, again, the 10,000 rain gardens project, which has been submitted as a potential NPF4 project, but also submitting a bid for EU LIFE funding. So that's no doubt going to be keeping Emily all that submission is sent off, but that's very positive. And certainly the engagement that the 10,000 rain gardens project and Emily has had on some of the surface water management projects that GCC have been delivering has been very useful and very beneficial and very much welcomed. There's also a little bit of chat in there around I'm just scrolling back up to that. Yeah, about when I said the Scottish Water surface water priority of or hierarchy of options in terms of surface water management. So just to expand a little bit on what I said about filtration, the predominantly glacial till heavy clay soils in the west of Scotland don't lend themselves to effective infiltration, and certainly not infiltration at a rate that would prevent a site from being able to rely entirely on infiltration. But that's not to say that it can't be done, and it should certainly be tested to prove that it can't be done. There are areas of the west of Scotland that it can be done. I'm thinking, you look at the names for areas, and that gives you a clue as to the soil conditions, and that comes to mind when we're talking about the Sandy Hills project, Sandy Hills Park in the east end of Glasgow. The name gives you a clue as to the soil type. So certainly it should be tested and looked at, but whether the development community rigorously I guess is a question that Scottish Water will ask when they approach for a potential surface water connection. And the first one around in that hierarchy of options about the storage and reuse on site, I think some of the slides which we saw from Louise about the potential for stormwater or runoff, rainwater, grey water reuse were interesting there. And as David's also mentioned, we're doing more exploring of that ourselves in Glasgow City Council area to see what can be done and tying that in with smart water management. So whilst in Scotland in general we've got plenty of rain, we do still run into periods of drought as well. So there's multiple benefits there in terms of reducing demand on the treated potable water system as well, if we can get storage and reuse on sites happening. Look through, seeing if there's any other specific questions that are coming up. People have also noted programme for government and its support and commitment to exploring opportunities for vacant and derelict land. The question we have in around our SEPA looking at surface water forecasting as an action in flood risk management cycle 2. David, I don't know if you want to offer any comment on that. Sorry, David Hay, I know you've been close to this. I think you've gone back on to, right.
Oh, apologies.
Still on mute too.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so apologies for that. The Council have been in discussion with SEPA on and off for a number of years, and we are hoping that SEPA will agree to bringing this forward as a target for cycle 2. I think it's fair to say that SEPA have obviously got a number of other forecasting projects and initiatives that they are having to work through, and I think the case that we are making to SEPA is that there are a significant number of properties at surface water flood risk within the city. So I think it's a kind of watch this space and see what comes out in the draft strategies next year.
Okay, thank you. There's a question there about any thoughts of the role of the open space strategies, and certainly I would say that I was on a call yesterday with Glasgow's open space strategy team to specifically talk about water management issues and discuss how we get the information from surface water management plans shared with our open space strategy teams so that they can map opportunities that may have been identified through surface water management plans, but then don't make it all the way through to the final delivery stage for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's funding, or most often it's funding, but certainly mapping those opportunities onto open space strategies so that we can see where there's an opportunity to manage surface water and consider that when other demands for open space come up, be that housing or other uses. And certainly that also then links into the next iteration of the city development plan for Glasgow. Will take that information and also look at future planning and say, well, areas of land here have been identified through surface water management plans and other hydraulic studies as having potential for managing surface water. How can we help to deliver that through development that then comes forward? So absolutely, yes, open space strategies have a role to play in that, and we need to share information with them. They can be informed of potential where there is potential for managing surface water. So there's another question I'm going to pick up here about the responsibility for flooding and what happens when homes are sold, and are those who caused flooding held to account? Is it even possible to track who has caused flooding? That's a difficult one. Working out where the water has come from is difficult unless there's a very obvious issue that has caused flooding to occur, i.e. someone has either purposefully or mistakenly blocked an outlet or an inlet to part of the drainage system. Then it can be difficult to find where flooding comes from. Certainly at the moment when homes are sold, the home report has, and I'll not be able to remember the exact language in it, but does have a box, I think, saying, has there ever been any flooding while you've owned that property? Now, if someone's been in there for a couple of years, or even if they've been in there for quite a large number of years, there may not have been flooding, and so they can justifiably answer no. It doesn't mean that that property is not at risk of flooding. So that's part of the reason why through the Property Flood Resilience Delivery Group that the Scottish Government is chairing, we're looking at the potential for tweaking home reports such that it is able to provide information on flood risk at a property, so that when that property is sold, the buyer is able to make an informed decision in terms of the level of potential flood risk for that property, and also the seller, if there is flood risk, has the opportunity to say, well, there's flood risk here, but here are the things that I've got in place. I've got a flood door, I've got a flood barrier, I've got air brick covers, so to mitigate the risk of flooding for that property. It's information that we'd like to get in there. I think there are some challenges around who makes that assessment, who's qualified to make the assessment of the adequacy of any measures. But the industry as a whole is learning and improving in terms of property flood resilience. certainly making informed decisions. We should all have the information that we need to make informed decisions, and particularly when you're purchasing a home, which is very often the most expensive purchase that you'll make in your life. Running to that, people will be familiar perhaps with Flood Re. So that's the scheme by which people who are having trouble getting home insurance for flooding are enabled through Flood Re to get home insurance for flooding. So it's basically, I don't know if subsidising is quite the right word, but it is basically a scheme that enables the premiums to be levelled out for people who are in flood risk and to be able to get reasonable insurance that covers them for flood risk. So Flood Re have also brought forward a proposal that is in early stages of discussion with UK government around having some sort of information sharing for properties that would, similar to what I was talking about for the home report, provide information to a buyer around the flood risk for that property. So there's those two trains of investigation are running in parallel at the moment, and we'll see over the next which one perhaps gets traction. But certainly, I think for selling a home, people need to have the information that they deserve when making that significant purchase. There's quite a lot of other questions that we've got in here, and we're now at 11:27. So forgive me, I'm going to call a halt to the questions section just so we can have a few words from David Harley. I will try and come back to some of these questions and pick them up and respond in the goodness of time. Or if people want to specifically drop me an email, my email's on the screen at the moment with your question, then I can try and get back to you with an answer. Or if I need to go and find out from someone else, then go and ask them to get back to you. I think we'll now just move on to David Harley and ask David Harley to offer by way of closing comment.
Thanks, James. Can you hear me, James? Just checking.
Yes.
Okay. You've given me just a few minutes now, so to cut things down, I'll have to try and make it meaningful. So I'm a member of the MGSDP board. It's a huge privilege. There's nothing like it in the country. It's the only place. It's got an engine room of collaboration and delivery underneath it, and it's unique in Scotland. However, I think we're all clear at this point that this is not a nice to have. The only way cities are going to succeed and flourish in Scotland into the future is if they build this blue-green infrastructure into the fabric of how things are done. And I guess, how do we do that? And it seems to me there's two main. I think we have the technical know-how, we have the skills, we have a lot of the policy framework, but maybe not all of it. But for me, it just seems like there's two things I'd like to leave you with that I think are needed, both ends of a spectrum in terms of strategic and in terms of the personal. The first one is, I think we need a plan, a flood adaptation plan or a water adaptation plan that looks for the rest of this century for cities like Glasgow. People are working on this sort of stuff at the moment. Climate Ready Clyde is going to come out with a strategy, a climate adaptation strategy at the end of coming up shortly in the next month or so. I would really urge you all to look out for that. We need to think. We all need to urge and think and cajole and push about how Glasgow adopts that way of thinking for climate change, and particularly for surface water and fluvial and tidal water management. The waters are rising. The city has to have a plan for how to deal with this over the long term. That could involve some hard stuff. It could involve blue-green has got a massive part to play in that. It could involve actually shifting around where the city actually functions, but it needs to have that plan. And with that plan comes an opportunity for big investment. Investors don't invest in cities that don't have a plan, haven't got control of this. That's the first thing I'd leave you with. Watch out for that, and let's take it seriously. Let's build it into how we do things. The second thing is really about, I think we collaborate pretty well on this stuff, and in Glasgow there's a lot of collaboration, but this is a systemic issue, and our remits of the various organisations and players that are involved in this aren't evolved or aren't designed to work in a systemic way. We've all got our own patch. Even within organisations, we've got our own departments that deal with various elements of this. What we need is a far more systemic way of working, and we have the organisations and the institutions we've got. We definitely have the skills, and we definitely have the know-how. So I think we really need to up our game in collaboration, all of us personally. You know, even when it comes to budgets, and even when it comes to the role of my organisation, you know, we're highly consultative. We to and fro with emails. That's good. There's always a room for that. But I think, and also the whole thing can sometimes become adversarial. We've come a long way, but I think we'd be able to go much further on that. And I really, you know, in terms of how we communicate, how we work with others, trying to create the space for collaboration, working around maps, working around a table. Not easy these days, but you get my drift. For resource managers and leaders, we're all leaders in this, we need to create the expectation for that collaboration. The ideal is that our team, our people and our expertise are gathered around this problem with the outcome as the main goal, not protecting your agency or your organization's interests or your department's interests or your department's budgets. We need to create that expectation. So I think we really need to up the collaborative spirit of this. So if there's two things I want to leave you with, watch out for the big plan, support it. Adaptation, climate change adaptation, I think is what we need, and for the future success of the city. And also, on a personal level, it's all about collaboration. It's all about teamwork around this common objective. So I'll leave it with that, James. I'll just say a few thank yous. James, you've put an awful lot of work into getting this together, so thanks very much. Some other great presentations from David and Louise. I think we're really chuffed to see the amount of attendance and the buzz in terms of the conversation. So I think we're very pleased with how the event's gone. So thanks very much to everybody, and I'll pass back to James.
Great, thanks for that, David. Well, and thank you for doing the thanks there as well. Yes, same for myself. Thanks to the speakers and for the support of Sniffer for this. There'll be a link to the video for this email will be circulated by email and made available on the MGSDP website in the coming weeks and in the next e-newsletter. I will apologise for running over in my section and also for the audio problems. I'll now, once I close down this meeting, I'll go and kick my son for switching on the Xbox at the wrong moment. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for attending. Any questions, please follow up with myself and have a good day and goodbye. Thank you.